Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am really delighted to introduce today's guest, Richard Newman. Richard is the founder of Body Talk. Over the past 22 years, his team have trained over 120,000 business leaders around the world to improve their communication and impact, including one client who gained over $1 billion in new business in just 1 year, using the strategies that Richard teaches. Business leaders all over the world rely on Richard to transform their communication and to speak on the biggest stages. Richard is highly introverted. He has high-functioning autism. He was painfully shy as a child. At the age of 18, Richard started his mission to discover the core communication principles. He went to live in the foothills of the Himalayas with Tibetan monks who spoke no English. They had to communicate nonverbally to understand each other. He then worked as a professional actor, studying how to walk, move, and speak to increase his impact on an audience. He became a keynote speaker, coach, author, and speechwriter, winning the coveted Cicero Grand Prize for Best Speechwriter of the Year. Richard's research on nonverbal communication was published in the Journal of Psychology. His study proved that you can increase your leadership ratings by 44% and win 59% more votes in an election by changing a few simple behaviors. Please join me in welcoming Richard Newman. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Thanks, Tammy. I appreciate that.
It's really great to have you here. I'm so excited to hear more about your journey and your work. And as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning. And in the introduction, we already touched on your early years a little bit, but take us back to some of those earlier years and where you began and how that may or may not have informed where you are today.
Great. Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, lots of us have pivotal moments in our childhood. And for me, the one that really stands out is that when I was 4 years old, I was going to school. I was loving life. I had a small gang of friends and, skipped to school and back. And then my parents told me that they were moving house to a new area. I was never going to see those friends again. And I was unhappy, but I was also excited about it. They put it to me as like, this is a new adventure. It's great for us. You're going to meet new people. And so I got to the new school, which was, many, many miles away from where I was used to. And I remember the beginning of that day vividly of walking into this classroom and feeling excited, thinking, wow, new place, new people. And then the next memory that I have of that day is a couple of hours later where I'm sitting at the table in the classroom. Those tiny little tables that you have in like infant school, kindergarten.
Right.
On those tiny little chairs. And I was trying to speak to the people on my left, the kids there, and they just sort of giggled, turned their back on me, weren't interested. And I tried to speak to the kids on the right, and they did the same thing. And then I tried to speak across the table, and I couldn't connect with anybody. And the feeling that I was left with was feeling like I was in a glass bubble of some kind, like just completely unable to connect with the other people around me, feeling isolated and lonely. And I'm sure, other people have had this sensation. You're surrounded by people, but you just feel extraordinarily lonely. And I did what a child might do at that age. And I just burst into tears, which is not what you ever want to do on your first day at a new school. And I was really concerned by this ability not to be able to connect. And I didn't know what was it that was happening where the other kids could connect with each other, but I couldn't. What was I missing? And it would take another 40 years from that moment for me to be diagnosed high-functioning autistic. But the challenges went through school age, and I continually remember thinking, what is it these other people are doing around me where they're building friendships and they seem to always know what to say and how to say it, and they're moving and like they're gesturing in a way that seems to be helping them. And then then I got a book given to me on my 16th birthday by a friend of mine who was sort of, noticing I was having a challenge. And it was a book called Body Language by Alan Pease, the classic book back in the day.
Yeah.
And she said, you really need this.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, well, that's a nice thing to say on someone's birthday. But I read it and suddenly like my eyes were awakened and I thought, wait a second, this is amazing. This is going to change everything for me. This is like the holy grail I found. But I then suddenly, I reflected on it and I thought, does everybody else already know this? Because I feel like I'm like playing catch up here. And I thought, well, I can learn some strategies, but I'm never going to be a good communicator. That's not in my future. And the final sort of turning point for me when I was 17 is that a friend of mine who is brilliant and amazing, and I love him to this day, he was like the hardest working, most intelligent kid at our school. And he had his life's dream really was to go to Oxford University, and he'd studied and he'd passed like the entrance exam. He went for the interview. We all knew he was going to get in, and then he got a rejection letter that said several things, but one of them it said was that he lacked the communication skills in his interview that they were looking for, and they were not giving him a place, and he was crushed by this experience. And I remember in that moment thinking, I will never be able to be as well-read, as hardworking and as intelligent as this man. He stands out. I went to a high-achieving school and he was the most high-achieving person there. I thought, I won't be able to catch up with him on those things. So I'd better make sure I catch up on communication skills because otherwise there's no hope for me. And so I thought, I have to start a mission for myself and other people like me to figure out what this is about. And so at the time I was being very strongly nudged by my family to go to university and study accounting or something like that because I was good at maths. So they figured, okay, that's a safe career for you. I wasn't interested in that. And so I turned down all of my university offers and I decided to go and make the world a better place was, my youthful way of thinking about it. And so I went aged 18 then, I took a place to go and live in a Tibetan monastery where I was living with monks up in the foothills of the Himalayas to teach them English because they'd requested to have an English teacher to help them connect with the outside world. And they needed sponsors to sort of help pay for the building and some food and so on so that they could stay existing as they were. But they couldn't communicate with them because they only spoke Tibetan. So I showed up at this monastery thinking they need to improve their English, not realizing they didn't speak any English at all. And so I get there, and to put context on this, it was 1995. This was before mobile phones, before the internet, before their satellite TV had reached their area. They had a phone in the monastery that worked for about maybe an hour a week. You could get it to work. We rarely had electricity. And if someone sent me a letter, it took 6 weeks for a letter to arrive. And so if I replied the same day, it would take 3 months for someone to get a reply from me. So very much cut off from things. And so I had to figure out how am I going to communicate with these people where I'm here with people who don't speak my language. And we learned a way of communicating, which was through body language, through tone of voice. We managed to figure out a way to connect. And I used that strategy to communicate with them. And then over the course of 6 months that I was living with them, I was able to communicate basic English to them. They could have a decent conversation. And I learned how to speak Nepali from them, which was the main language of the area of the foothills that we were in. And so I came back just transformed by this experience, thinking it's amazing what body language can do. There's so much more depth to it. I think often when people hear the term body language, they think, oh, it's about scratching your nose, folding your arm. It's like surface level. What I learned is actually, no, this is the deep way in which human beings have connected, have communicated for thousands of years before we had a common language. We had to find a way to use our behavior to connect with each other. And so I kept on studying it ever since. I launched my company. I should say I studied acting as well for a few years to build up my confidence with communication and storytelling and presence. And, since then I've read about 300 books in the area of communication on various different subjects and topics just to master the area, and launched a company to teach communication to help other people who are struggling like me. And and here we are. We've trained 120,000 people all over the world how to communicate. And I think, part of that, a lesson I really hope people take away from it, part of the reason I've been able to do that is because I really struggled with it. And so therefore I had to figure out what are the building blocks of communication, because I didn't have any of them. And so I got to a place where when I'm coaching someone now, if they're saying, look, I need more gravitas, I need more presence, I can say to them, okay, these are the bricks that you're missing in your wall at the moment. The other things are in place, I can see them, but these pieces are not. And so very quickly you can then transform someone's impact by looking at those pieces, which, if I'd been born neurotypical, which is what most people are, that I may never have felt the need to go and study those pieces and figure those pieces out.
Wow. That is an amazing story. I want to roll back the tape a little bit, even though we don't use tape anymore for video. But I'm just so curious the way you processed your friend's experience when he didn't get in to, did you say Oxford? Yeah. And then relating that to your own, kind of your own experience in some way, and then being determined to figure something out for yourself. And I'm curious about how I've seen where a lot of young people will go somewhere different from their own country to teach English. How did you make the connection, though, to go teach Tibetan monks English? How did you land there? I mean, obviously, at least I should say, to me, it feels obvious. Clearly, it was meant to be that you ended up in this remote place where all you could do, at least initially, was rely on body language, like almost like you were meant to do this. That's how it feels to me. And it's fascinating. Yeah. But how did you, why didn't you go, I don't know, to Japan or China or somewhere else to teach people English like some people do?
When I was being nudged towards going to university, studying accounting or whatever it was going to be, I felt very strongly in my gut, that is not my life. That is not where I want to be. There is something else that I am meant to do. And so I also knew that I'd grown up in an upper middle class background. We had a nice house. There was always food on the table. And I really felt a strong calling. Before I go to university, before I study anything, before I go into my career, I really want to help other people who are not as fortunate as me. And so I went to this gap year activity. It was called GAP, Gap Year Activity Project organization. And I said, I want to help people. Here's my background. What have you got? And they noticed that I'd done a couple of plays on my CV, or like my mini CV at that time, aged 17 and a half. And they said, okay, we've got a placement for you here. It's in India, and it's you're going to be at a rich kids' school. It's a private school where they've got the most amazing facilities you'll ever see, and you're going to run the drama department because they're really looking for someone English to come on. And I said to them, you really don't understand what I'm looking for. I don't want to go somewhere where people are already well off and just make their life slightly better. I want to help people who really need some help, somewhere remote, really, give me what you've got. And it was at that point they said, well, there is this one place and nobody's actually ever taught there. But we've heard that they need a teacher. I mean, if you really want a challenge, I said, that's the one that I want. And so they set me up with it. And so when I got there, nobody from their organization, had really been there to sort of, see what they needed, nor did anyone come out to support me at any time because they had a mix up. They weren't able to get there. So I landed in this place where and I did 1 week crash course, by the way, before I went out on how to teach English as a foreign language. And we learned on the course, they taught us about this is how you use a blackboard. Back in the days that blackboards were being used instead of smartboards, whiteboards. This is how to use a blackboard, and this is how to do icebreakers to help your class get to know each other, because you'll need to do that in the first week of school. And I got there to a place that didn't have a blackboard, and these monks had known each other for years. And so I thought, okay, well, let's just scratch that.
Yeah.
And, do you remember, have you ever seen the movie Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams? Yeah.
Sure.
So that was in my mind. I was thinking, I'm going to Robin Williams this. That's what I'm going to do. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go for it and talk to them about, greetings. How do you greet people? And we'll act it out and we'll sort of role play our stuff. And one of the most fun lessons that I did that I remember was I was teaching them textures. And so what I did is I got a bucket and I put things that have different textures inside the bucket. And then I blindfold them. I get them to put their hand in. So they would touch something that had a texture and I'd say what that word was in English. So I put like a fluffy toy in there. They'd touch it and I'd say fluffy. And then I had a bowl of water in there. I put their hand in it and I'd say wet. So they just get the idea. It's not because I wanted them to differentiate between water and wet. I wanted them to know when you touch it, that's wet. When you look at it, it's water. And so, there's different things that I did along those lines. But it was very much a calling for me of go serve other people who are not as fortunate as yourself.
I don't mean to unpack this into all kinds of details, but I am just so curious. When you showed up there, were they expecting you? Did they know why you were there? What's this, 18-year-old kid doing here with a bunch of Tibetan monks in the middle of nowhere? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's funny you say, because so when I got to the little town, it was a little town back then. It's got bigger since then. So when I got to the town, I just went to there was a little area for taxis, and I went up to the taxis and I just said monastery, until somebody went, oh yeah, he got me in the back of his Jeep, and we drove off. We got to this monastery, and I walked in, and the monks there were very gracious, and they're just yes, and sort of showing me, and they sat me down in, I remember this very dark, dingy kitchen where there was a tiny little window, but not really. And they brought me some Tibetan tea. And Tibetan tea, if people haven't tried it, it's a third tea, a third butter, and a third salt. It's potent to try it. Yeah,
I've never heard of that.
I was just sipping this. Yeah, it's pretty bad. But they used to use it. They would take flasks of it when they were trekking through the Himalayas. They would take flasks of it to give them sustenance.
Yeah.
So they thought, okay, tea, butter, salt gives you a bit more than just tea.
Sure.
And so I'm sitting there sipping this tea, and they're sort of looking at me and looking at each other, and then looking back at me. And I was trying to show them and trying to say I'm going to teach you. And they're sort of looking, and they didn't understand. And eventually, I got this letter out. That it was the one letter I'd had, which sort of explained what I was going to do. And I just showed it to them. I was like, this. And they looked at it, and they looked at each other. And one of them was like, oh, gesturing to the door like I should leave. And one of them was like, no, you should stay here. And so what I worked out, they're having this argument. It turned out I was in the wrong monastery. I didn't in a tiny little town. I didn't expect there'd be more than one. How many monasteries are there going to be in a town of 7,000 people?
That is so
But I was in the
funny.
wrong monastery. So eventually they told me to leave. But I think one of them secretly wanted me to stay. No, we should keep him here. Anyway, so I left. I went to 5 monasteries. So this area is a place where Tibetans who are living in exile, they would move to this one particular place and set up little monasteries around. So I eventually got to the final one. And the reason I knew it was the right place, I looked at the letter. There was a symbol on the letter, and it matched the symbol above the archway of that monastery. And I'm
goodness.
Thank goodness I'm in the right place. And they had been sent a letter of some sort, there's somebody is coming. And I don't know if they got it translated locally by someone to help them out. But so they were expecting someone to show up. I'm not sure if they're expecting someone quite as young and who'd never taught English before. But one of the good things I do remember about that day, they had never had hot water before in their monastery, and it arrived that day, the day that I got there. Not for my arrival, it just happened that one of their sponsors had paid for a hot water tank. And so they'd been having cold showers for years up until this day. So it was like a happy celebration day for them.
That is a wonderful story. I mean, it just speaks to so many things. I can imagine what was going on in your mind as you were going from monastery to monastery and thinking, what were you thinking? What was I thinking about going to this, doing this thing? Where do I belong? Yeah. And
well, actually, I tell you, this is part of the power of people not believing in you. I feel like my entire life, and it includes today, I continuously get underestimated. I don't know if it's linked to the autism thing or if people just do that to everybody. But I repeatedly get people saying, you're never going to do that. There's no way you could possibly succeed at doing that, whatever it is I want to achieve. And so anyway, in that situation, my friends had all been making bets on how soon I was going to come home. And the longest bet anybody had made was 10 days. So in my head, I was like, I am not leaving this place for 11 days because I'm going to win that bet. And by the time I've been there 11 days, like I was in and I was very much at home there. But that was really driving me. But I was beginning to think, I'm never going to find it. Like this is crazy. How many monasteries are there? I could be searching for days. Like, where am I going to sleep tonight? Until I eventually found the right place, and it all seemed to be like a little look. We had this look of recognition of like, oh, okay, we're expecting someone who's maybe like you, and here we go.
That is definitely a character building experience, if anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Just that journey in and of itself would have been something with lots of takeaways right there.
Yeah.
And so how long did you remain there?
So all in all, I was away 8 months, but I was at the monastery for 6 months. And I was living in, I had this bedroom that was just above their temple. So they had sleeping quarters for the monks away from the temple, and then they had the temple, and then there was this, I think it was 2 bedrooms above the temple. And what that meant is that 5 a.m. every morning, I would be awoken by bang, bang. And they had never clearly had a lesson in how to play the musical instruments that were in their temple, but they would just blow them and bang them as loudly as they could at 5 a.m. Every morning, waking me up. So I never needed an alarm clock.
And did you ever get used to the Tibetan tea?
Thankfully, I can't remember at what point the switch was made, but they started making me Indian tea. And Indian tea is very milky. Like the traditional way, I remember watching them make it, is that there's no water in it. So you boil milk with tea leaves in it until it looks milky. And then you add about 4 tablespoons of sugar, and then that's your tea. And they would bring me flasks, I think 2 liter flasks, maybe a liter, I can't remember. But I would have about 4 of those per day just brought to me routinely. Wow. And, I was 18, so I could take that amount of caffeine. I don't know. If I was given that amount of caffeine and sugar today, I'd explode.
Wow. I'm just taking in the amount of growing and learning that you accumulated in that 6 to 8 month period. You must have returned home after that just transformed. Yeah,
completely. And I think, if someone's listening to this and they're a parent, and they're parents want to be protective of their children. They want them to be safe. They want them to be okay. And I'd say if you've got a child who is wanting to go and do something like that, let them go. And I will say that with the caveat of being male, traveling to India, I got a very much a free pass compared to women who went there. Some of the women who went there, if a white woman was by herself somewhere, then she could really get problems with the men in India. So I'm tall, I'm white. I have privileges from there that I'm always aware of. But I would say, if they want to explore the world before they go to university in some way, just let them do it. And what it gave me was, I had never been on holiday overseas without my parents at this point. And so there I was suddenly on this mission. Firstly, it took me actually 2 days traveling from Delhi. I got a train that took a day and a half overnight up to the foothills, then a 3-hour taxi ride. I had to navigate this whole thing by myself. My senses were being blown and overwhelmed by this whole thing. Just trying to think, okay, I have to now completely rely on myself. I've got to be alert. I've got to figure things out. I've got to create plans. I need to budget the money that I have. Oh yeah, and one thing that happened was I thought, I don't want anyone stealing my credit card, so I put it in my shoe, thinking no one's going to look in my shoe. And it was back in the days where you had the strip on the back where you do your signature.
Yeah.
And so my feet got sweaty and rubbed off the signature. So I had no credit card for 3 months. while I was there. I just had to survive on, I forget what it's called, like traveler's checks, I think, that I was using. So I had to really carefully budget. And what it also gave me was I spent a couple of months traveling around Southeast Asia after I was doing the teaching. And I was in a position where I could decide to change countries at a moment's notice. Like I remember waking up one day in Malaysia thinking, I don't want to be in Malaysia anymore. I want to go to Indonesia. I'm going to make that happen. And I just go and book it. And, by the end of the day, I was there.
Wow.
And it was really hard, actually, when I came home. Money ran out. But I came home. And then even my car, my sister had borrowed it. She'd taken it off to university with her. So it was hard for me to even leave the house when I got home. I was sort of grounded and thinking, okay, now I need to get used to what, real everyday life is like for a lot of people. But it had given me that freedom to, and I think the other piece of freedom it really gave me was to think independently, not to go down the well-trodden path of everybody else. I saw a lot of my friends going off to university, getting very, I remember one person in particular getting very particular about his looks and being fashion conscious and trying to have the right clothes and say the right things all the time. And, it really threw him off to see that I wasn't bothered by that. Like I'd grown my hair out, I had a beard, I was wearing clothes that had like little rips here and there, but I really wasn't bothered. There was no self-consciousness about it. I just thought, this is what I want to wear. This is who I am. And that's really stood me in good stead ever since then of never needing to worry about peer pressure. It's never going to push me in one direction because I know who I am, I know where I'm going, and I'm okay with it. And I know that I can look after myself to get somewhere. So it's given me a strong sense of self in that piece. And it's also shown me that I can do things that nobody thinks that I can do, even things that I didn't think I could do. So it's a really powerful experience. And I've got 2 kids now, and I will certainly encourage them if they want to go and explore the world and try and, take on more responsibility, then, encourage them and empower them to do that, I think.
I love that. And I'm curious. I want to move forward in your story, but I am really curious about how that has formed your ideas about, you've helped so many people make transformations. And I think making transformations does require elements of taking some risks, kind of going outside your comfort zone. Clearly, you did that multiple times, built your confidence and, going beyond what people told you could do, almost to the point where it's like, don't tell me I can't do this kind of thing, right? And I'm sure that not everything turned out the way you expected it to or hoped to. I mean, we all learn through things that don't go the way we expect them to, whether we call those failures, mistakes, whatever labels people put on them. To me, it's just, oh, that didn't turn out the way I thought it would. And so I learned something that I didn't expect to learn, or it just went in another direction. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that when you think, oh, I'm going to try something I didn't know I could do, and I wasn't even sure I'd be able to do it the way I hoped it turned out. What's your philosophy about that?
Yeah, I think, I've heard people say we don't really learn from success. We just think, oh, I did well, and we keep going. But when we fail, we reevaluate things. And I think that's been very powerful for me, where I didn't end up going to university. I never went to business school, but now I run this business, and I've got 22 people that I look after, and we have clients everywhere. And that it's come from absolute persistence to my mission, that I will not stop. I will not give in. I'm not going to let making the wrong financial decision or having people we dealt with a toxic culture in our company at one stage where the company nearly got pulled to shreds. We dealt with the recession 2008. We dealt with 2020 where we used to, in 2019, to give people like an idea, we were spending about $300,000 a year on flights, because most of our work was all over the world. I would take about 50 flights per year to travel to people across, Australia, the Americas, Asia, all across Europe. And every single thing we did was face-to-face. And so the pandemic just shut down everything. And we had a big lineup of events. I remember the beginning of 2020 feeling excited, thinking, we're going to be doing so amazing this year. We've worked so hard for it. And then everything disappeared. And people looked at me as if to say, okay, how soon are we going to go bankrupt? Because we had a big London office, an expensive office. We had a lot of people on the payroll and nothing coming in. And, it was a huge challenge to look at that sort of thing. But I think that, in that moment, I decided I'm going to be the rock in the storm, and I will make sure that we move forwards. And I think part of that came from I've been through a lot of learning business trial and error, making the wrong decision. I remember when I paid somebody to help me with marketing, with just about the last £600 that I had in my business account, because she promised me it was going to go great. Immediately regretted it, thought I've been talked into this, called them back within 10 minutes saying, I'm sorry, I need the money back. I've got to cancel this. They refused. They then brought in no business. And, and that was back when that amount of money was painful.
Right.
And I've made, bigger errors since then. But I think all of those pieces are a bit like, for me, it's a bit like going to the gym where, initially you lift the little weights and then you lift slightly bigger weights and then you lift slightly bigger weights and eventually you can lift the really big weights. If you go in one day and you've never been to the gym and you try and lift the really bigger weights, you'll get hurt. You physically won't be able to do it or you'll damage yourself. And I think the same thing is what I've experienced in business, is that the little trials and challenges along the way have built up the strength such that when that moment hit and everyone was looking at me and people in my company were even saying, we need to refuse to pay our taxes. We need to make people redundant. We are going to go out of business. And there was a lot of people in my industry really deeply concerned, rightly so, because they're trying to look after people and there's no income. And, I think I was able in myself just to tap in and go, you've been through tough things before. Yes, this is a big challenge, but this is like just going along the dumbbells at the gym and lifting one that's slightly heavier than you've done before. So you can do this. And we were more financially successful in 2020 than we were in any other year in our history. And we've kept on going upwards. And it was, it partly came down to that sense of I've had so many failures, and that's why I can now take on these bigger challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So
what do you think it was that, it's one thing to say we've been through tough things before. What is it that, and I'm not even asking you exactly what did you do as much as, what is it that within you that said, we're going to make this work?
I think right at the heart of it for me is that I'm on a mission of service. That's what I do this for. Like, going right back to that first decision of I'm going to go and teach English, not at a posh school with drama department. I'm going to help people who really need help. And I started this business thinking, I really want to help people. I am here to do it for that reason. And I want to reach as many people as possible and grow my team as much as possible so we serve the greatest number. And so there's a matter of service there. There was also a matter of service to my team where I thought I will not let this pandemic situation impact them. And so it was absolutely service mentality because, for me, this business has always been a mission. How many people can I serve along the route? And I think that that's powerful because it means that, yes, I want the company to grow. Yes, I want the financial results to be bigger because I know that means we've served more people. I can measure the number of people who've come through, the number of clients. But the piece I was mentioning there too is that I could start to see this pandemic coming. And so,
you could?
Yeah, I just got a sense of, okay, this is going to be big. My wife's a doctor, and so she was sort of giving me a heads up of this is going to be something.
Yeah.
And I remember even when the schools shut down, my wife said to the receptionist, she said, well, see you in September, see you in the next school year. And the receptionist said, what do you mean? You'll be back in like 3 weeks. And she said, I don't think we will. And she was right. So pretty early on, I got a heads up this is going to happen. So February 1st, I just stopped earning money from the company. I said, I am not going to take money out until everyone is okay, until everyone is financially looked after, and we'll do something that helps people. And so for the rest of that year, until January 1st the next year, I didn't earn anything. A couple of the leadership team on my business volunteered to take a pay cut as well to make sure that everyone would be okay. And then we started to think, well, what can we do? And I remember thinking, I can't remember actually which president it is, but one of the US presidents had this idea when there weren't enough jobs to pay people to go out and do stuff that would be of service. Like they paid people to go to the park and hold balloons and give free balloons out to children, because then they had a sense of purpose and they're making the world better in that way. And I thought, what can we do actually to generate an income for our trainers that's actually good for us long term too? So, there were some newer people on my team. I said, we're going to double down on training you, on upskilling you, because then I can look you in to do work and I can pay you to do that work. And so then we're ready for when things come back in the future. So, it was very much about a sense of this is going to be long, this is going to be hard, but we are going to come out the other side. And when we get there, we're going to be thriving. So really approached it with that mentality.
And I would also imagine through this whole time, because we're not totally through it yet, that you've learned a great deal. I mean, given the kind of work that you do, there was just a whole nother world of learning available to you as a result of this.
we had this massive learning curve as a team. We had never done a Zoom call at the beginning of 2020. I didn't even know how it worked. I didn't know where you pressed to get on the call. And then we ended up very quickly landing jobs with clients. I went out and reached out to all of our major clients saying, what do you need? How do we serve your team right now? And we ended up running sessions on Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, WebEx. And we had to learn, how do you do those things? And how do you engage someone where, like, rather than just do what you used to do in a classroom with them and then sort of turn on a camera and do the same thing, how do you reinvent what you're doing? I was mentioning earlier too, I've got this mixing desk here for the sort of home studio so I can interact with people in a different kind of way. And we got to the point where we actually realized how good this was for us, how good it was for our clients, because we could do a session where typically, this morning I was in London, I was teaching a group of 200 people. And for them to do that, they have to pay everyone to travel to that building from all over the place. They have to pay for their hotels. They have to pay then for their food when they're in the building. And then they have to pay for them to travel home. And there's my time getting there and getting back as well. It's a massive expense.
Right.
And we learned during the pandemic, what we could also do is we could all just turn on a webcam 5 minutes before the start and we could do it for an hour. And so it got to the point where before the pandemic, I was able to serve one client every 3 days because I would fly there, do the event and fly home. So it's pretty much, unless I was doing something in London, my hometown, there was a delay. Whereas in the pandemic, we found out we could do 3 sessions a day. So not one every 3 days, but 3 per day, because I could get up early and serve our clients in Japan at sort of 6 or 7 a.m. my time. Middle of the day, I can do Europe and the Middle East. And in the evening, I can then serve clients all the way across to sort of Seattle and everywhere in between. And so we were actually able to serve them at a way that was much lower cost for them money-wise, much lower cost for them time-wise, because they're not having all that travel and man hours and all that sort of stuff. And so a lot of that has kept on going. At this point, we're doing 70% of our work virtual still.
Wow.
And 30% is face-to-face. And that's been changing. I don't know what it's going to be by the end of this year. In July, it was 90% virtual. August became 80% virtual. September is 70%. It's like starting to go. I think by the end of the year, it might be 50-50.
Yeah.
But, I'm very pleased to be able to offer something greater. I think there's been a huge lesson for people that you can do your job, you can do it effectively, and then you can switch off the webcam and immediately hug your children if you want to. And I'm at a time where I've got 2 young kids and I got to spend time with them that I never had before. I also, this is where things creep up on you. When we started doing overseas jobs about 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, it was exciting. I was like, wow, I get to go to Prague. I get to go to Paris. This is amazing. And it would happen once every 3 months. And when it got to the point of doing 1 or 2 countries a week, I didn't realize until the pandemic started, I'd been jet lagged for 10 years.
Yeah.
I was waking up thinking, why am I alert? This is odd. This is new. And I'd go to bed in the evening thinking, I'm still able to focus. I can still function pretty well. But I hadn't realized all those things and that impact. So I think there's been some great learnings there.
Yeah. And I would imagine they'll keep coming. And I would also think that your clients will be, and probably already are, speaking with you about the benefits and virtues of having people continue to work from home versus coming into the office, and what the advantages and disadvantages of that are. I know I'm working with a lot of leaders myself who are really grappling with that now. And I can imagine your work is really informing people about where that's effective and where it may not really matter as much in terms of how people are communicating and how they can communicate effectively either way, and how to navigate that kind of communication.
And I think I'm intrigued to see where we go in the future, because I was just with a client 2 weeks ago where they have, without question, the most spectacular work premises I've ever seen that I could ever imagine. It's beautiful. And I thought if I was working here, I'd be here every day. Like, this is a lot nicer than my home. It's fantastic. They got massage facilities, a gym, they got a pool table, they got beautiful artwork on the walls. It's on the water. Like, it's just everything. They've got fantastic food on offer. And yet the building, I would say, my guess is it was 90% empty. It's a building for 5,000 people and they just haven't come back. Yeah. And so I think, people, leaders, employers are going to really have to think about, what do I want? What do I need to achieve? Does that require being together? And how am I going to put that message forward to my team to make sure that they understand the benefit of why are we coming together? It's not just so we have an eye on you. There needs to be another reason for it. Right. And it also can't be like, they were talking to me about, actually various clients have talked to me about their ways of trying to get people back in the office. They've done like a special food day where you get free, amazing food. So everyone come together. Or they've also said, what if we pay you more to come to the office? Or what if we give you extra time off? What if we give you an extra day off a month? And people are still not doing it. And so there has to be a greater reason given to people. I would come out on this on the side of, I believe that people need to be together. But there was there's a huge challenge with what we did with the lockdown of separating humans, where thank goodness we had, imagine during the pandemic in the 1980s, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no webcams, there's no mobile phones. It would have been terrible. So thank goodness that we had Wi-Fi and webcams to get through this. Right. But there is a very different human feeling of being in a room with another human. And that can't be fully replicated elsewhere. So it's going to be important for leaders to think about, well, what is that? What is that value? Why is it important to our team? And, making sure you put that message forward to people in a way that makes sense to them, where they feel motivated to be with others.
Yeah. I think so many people have been changed by this period of time. It's difficult for them to think about what does it need to look like now. And they've gotten so accustomed to even not having to commute, things like that it's hard for them to pivot back into something that they're relating to what their experience is, rather than that it could actually be a new way of doing things. Yeah. And I think it's going to be very interesting, as you said, to where it goes. So over the years, you finished up your adventures at 18, and what developed over that time that brought you to where you are today?
Well, I think, many things, actually. So it gave me a good grounding in understanding something about communication that I was then able to build everything else on, which came from a different place than anybody else I was aware of in the field, which was I had learned the essence, the importance of congruency in communication, which is simply that your body, your voice, and your words have to go in the same direction in order to really make an impact with communication. I learned that because when I was teaching the monks, if I was trying to teach them the word excited, if I didn't look excited or sound excited, I could have been saying pineapple. They had no idea. So I had to have total congruency. And that really gave me something important, coming from a background of being, a poor communicator and being desperately shy, very introverted, like not having any idea what to do with people, very sort of socially awkward. I then thought, everything needs to flow together. And when you get everything flowing together, this is a part of where a charismatic communicator gets their essence, because you can see how much they're committed. They totally believe in what they are saying, because you see it visually, vocally, the words, everything's heading in the same direction. Whereas when I train a lot of people, like I often speak at conferences where there's leaders who go up on stage and they're nervous and they put on the poker face and they want to come across as professional. So they put on their professional voice and they say, good morning, everyone. We are going to have an amazing day. I've got some exciting news. I've also got some fantastic news. And you're listening to it thinking, are we going to get fired today? It sounds like the company's going to the ground. So there's no congruency there. So a lot of what we teach is actually, what is congruency and how do you get it back? What are all the habits that are holding you back? And how do you get back to a place where you're doing visually, vocally, and with your words, the things that people need in order to connect? So that was a big piece that I got from that. I also learned from it to believe in my gut instinct, that I can do something, even if nobody else believes in me, even if everyone else says, you can't do this, it's the wrong thing to do, it's not what people do, it's not, the societal expectation. I went to a school where there was, I'm trying to think, it was about 300 and, let's say maybe 300 kids in my year. And I say kids, we thought we were men, but we were really kids. But when somebody asked, who here is going on a gap year before university, there's only 3 of us that raised our hands. The expectation was, obviously, you go to university. You don't leave and get a job. You don't do anything else. You go to university. And I had a gut instinct. That's not my path. I'm going to do something else. And I don't actually really know where it came from, but I just thought, listen to the gut. And in very difficult times, when I've had hard decisions to make, because any business leader will know you have to make hard decisions at some point. Being able to trust my gut and know the difference between that and the voice of fear has been super important. That's
I love that. That's a great distinction. The voice of fear versus listening to your gut. And I think sometimes the voice of fear is actually leads you to your gut. Because sometimes fear and excitement can feel like the same thing.
Yeah.
And it can make, if you listen to that, you say, wait, which way is this taking me? But I think at such a young age that you really listen to that. And it sounds like you had your family's support too, which must have made a huge difference for you. Yeah. So when did you actually start your business?
So I started it. So when I came back from living with the monks, I then pretty soon got into an acting school. So I'm trying to remember. So I did some work just to earn some money, ready for college. I then studied acting in London for 3 years, which was very sort of physical training. It was all about and I'm proud to say I was working many more hours than some of my friends who went to university. They had like 2 lectures a week. I was doing 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day, Monday to Friday, and often working Saturday mornings. And we were learning about how to sit, how to stand, how to breathe, how to move in a way that would command the attention of an audience and create a character and tell a story, which was fantastic. And I was sort of hoping to go into acting. And I realized very quickly, like I got an agent, I started to do some work in that field, but I just didn't like the acting profession. I love acting, didn't like the acting profession. And it just didn't sit well with me. And during that time, I then, and this was another pivot moment for me in my life. I was getting my hair cut and my hairdresser said to me, what are you interested in? What do you do? And I talked to him about, living with the monks, studying acting, wanting to serve people. I was, I've been teaching English. And he said, you should come back here next week and teach my trainee hairdressers how to communicate, because they're, these London teenagers, they're streetwise, but they just don't know how to communicate. And when someone's in their chair and they're trying to convince them that they can give them this magical new hairstyle and they look, all nervous and anxious, the person gets up and leaves. They don't want them to have their scissors near their head. And he said, you'd be perfect for that. And my gut response, I still remember sitting in the chair, I just thought, oh God, I don't want to do that. I feel terrified by that idea. And I can never come back to this hair salon. Like, I like this guy, but I'm not going to walk through the front door again because I don't want him to make me do this. I just nodded and smiled, and he said, I'll give you a free haircut in return for a job, doing a couple of hours. I said, oh, right, yeah, sure. So I went to the front desk. I made sure I paid for the haircut and left, and thought, I'm never coming back. And then about 5 weeks later, I thought, I'm going to need a haircut soon, and because I've got short hair, so I cut it off. And I thought, he's probably forgotten. He sees thousands of people. He doesn't remember who I am or what he said. And so I booked again. And the second I sat down in the chair, he said, oh yeah, you're doing that thing. You're going to do we talked about, you're going to do this free session, right? Next Tuesday, I'll book it in for 2 hours. Don't pay today. And then I was thinking, I've just lost the last 6 weeks where I could have been preparing for this. I didn't. 4 days. And so I then really worked at it day and night, trying to figure out, what do I teach? How do I fill up 2 hours? What do I even know that might be useful? And put together this session. And to my surprise and delight, they loved it. And I loved it. I walked away thinking, oh yeah, that's the euphoric feeling I used to get when I was teaching the monks. Like that sense of, I've helped them have a breakthrough here. I've given them something they didn't have before. And they said, when are you coming back? And I thought, I've just worked day and night to try and figure out what to fill 2 hours with. I don't have anything else. But I figured out something else. And then I kept on going back a few times. And then I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy who was head of an engineering company. And he said, hope you don't mind me calling you. I was given your number today because I was having my hair cut, and my hairdresser tells me you are the number one communication coach in the country. You should come and coach my engineers. And I got 30 people. They're working in an exhibition, and just come and train them on Sunday. How much do you charge? In my head, I'm thinking, I charge a free haircut. Like, what are you going to give me? And so I said, oh, great. Okay, I'll have to just check my calendar. I'll call you back. And so I called my dad and I said, this has just happened. What do I do? And he said, you charge as much as you think you can get away with charging. That's what you do. And so I thought, at the time I was actually working as a waiter. And so, just to sort of pay my rent and in between acting jobs. And I thought, okay, what if I could charge like the same amount that I would normally earn in a week as a waiter, which I think at the time, if I remember rightly, was about 275 British pounds. So the exchange rate's terrible at the moment. So it'd be like $300.
Right.
And so I called them back and I said, yes, I can do it. I'll charge you, the equivalent of $300. And they were like, well, that's amazing. Gosh, we had a budget of like 10 times that, but great, if that's what you charge. And so in my head, I'm like, mental note, charge more next time. And then I went and did it, but it was the first time I'd done it for people who weren't hairdressers. And I did about an hour, maybe 90 minutes. And again, at the end of that, people were coming up to me, shaking my hand, saying, that was fantastic. I've learned stuff I never knew. And thank you so much. And I'm going to use this. It's going to be so useful. And I left with this total feeling of euphoria, thinking, I don't like waiting on tables. Like, I'll do it because, it's a way to earn money and keep my days free for auditions. But I have just earned in the space of an hour what normally takes me a week of hard graft, working through to like 2 a.m., trying to, serve people who are clicking their fingers at me. And now I've just done something where I think I've been greater service to people. And it only took me an hour and they loved it. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. And so I set up a website, and this was back, like this was early 2000. I think it was 2000. My dad just happened to know somebody who knew somebody about like, how do I get a website? And I paid about $5 to get like this website template up and running and like put in some text. The next day, the BBC called me up and they said, we've seen your website. We hear you're this amazing communication coach. Come in and we're going to feature you in a TV show, because we want somebody just like you. And that particular show actually didn't end up happening. But I was like, this internet thing's amazing. And so I just kept on getting inquiries coming through. And then I started to go and I would do speeches at networking events and like sort of promoting people to come to an event that I was going to run and getting my name out there. And, that started to roll. And, I don't want to simplify it for anyone who's planning to start a business. The first 10 years of running the business, I earned virtually zero. I would just take whatever I got and
put it back in.
Take it back and put it back in. So it took about 10 years to get to the point where I was like, oh, I could actually take a decent income from this now. I could take the money out and I have enough to reinvest. And then, kept on going. And here I am, 22 years later. But I actually think, part of the reason in 2008, when there was the recession, my dad called me up and he said, you're going to go out of business. Like, this thing's coming. He's an investor. He knew like what was happening in the markets.
Yeah.
said people cut training. They definitely cut anything about body language and communication. It's not essential. So you're going to have troubles here. And we grew that year, and we grew the next year. And, we grew through the pandemic. And I think partly what that's been done by is that I did the hard graft right from the beginning. There's not been any like cold calling, trying to get people who don't know who we are to do business. It's been going out there, do the work, meet people, give them something for free to begin with, build the relationship, come back again. And, to the point now where still, like, even though we do a lot with marketing, about 90% of our work comes through recommendation,
yes.
reputation, word of mouth. And there was people during the pandemic who called us and said, "Oh, I think I saw Richard do a talk 10 years ago, and I've always kept his information, and we could use working with him right now." And so I've always had this as something important for my team, saying to them, every day we go into a classroom, every day we show up at an event, our reputation for the next 10 years, 20 years is on the line. We never, ever under-deliver. We always make sure we walk away and everyone says that was exceptional. So, we always want to do that because we know that then not only are we going to deliver something great, but it's going to be good for all of us long term.
Well, that sounds wonderful. Can you tell our audience what's the best way for them to find out about everything that you are up to and your company is up to?
Yeah, sure. So if people want to find out more, if they go to ukbodytalk.com, ukbodytalk.com, and in there's more information, and there's also a lot of free resources. If you go to the resources page, there's videos, there's articles, loads of stuff for people.
We will have everything in the show notes. People will be able to follow your work in great detail. I have no doubt about that. I want to wrap up with one final question. So a lot of people listening to this are thinking about what's next for them. And I think your story certainly is inspiring in terms of, some very key messages that you've given here. And, if you were to give somebody one key piece of advice as they are considering their next moves or making some kind of a pivot or transition, what would be a key piece of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think, for me, the key advice I would give people going through that transition point is what people tend to do is look inwards. And that can lead to nervousness and anxiety and a lot of self-focus that really doesn't help us in that stage. And I would say, don't do that. Look outwards and dedicate your life to serving others in some way. Because if you aim to do that next sort of career step that really is about serving yourself, then you're not going to feel deeply fulfilled by it. And you'll probably get rejected because people will sense you're here for you. You're not here for us.
Right.
And so I would always look at what are the core skills? What are the core talents, the core passions that you have? And how are they useful for others? So in fact, I actually go through this with, sometimes I work with charities, with young people, and I say to them, like, is anyone interested in starting a business? And a few people put their hands up and I say, right, we're going to do this exercise. You're going to write down 20 things you're really passionate about, areas that are not only skills that you have, because I had a skill in maths, but I didn't want to be an accountant.
Right.
Areas that you're passionate about, where you could show up and do that all day long. And then I say to them, now ring 3 of them that you believe are useful for others. Because I'm passionate about basketball, but no one is ever going to pay to watch me play because I can barely get it in the ring. So what are 3 of those areas that you believe would be tremendously good in serving others?
This is exactly the kind of messages that I also share with people in terms of thinking about what really, what matters to you. And if you do take the focus off of yourself and how you can add value elsewhere, you'll be able to put one foot in front of the other. Well, Richard, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm delighted to have had you here. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Richard Newman. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his extraordinary career journey and his interests. What's your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 203. Are you anticipating your next professional move? check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon Worldwide, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Richard, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd really appreciate reading your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through the website, tammygullerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help sustain the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, I appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. I'd love to hear how it's going for you. Drop me a line. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.